Hello? Hello, Bryan?
Yeah, just a minute. Hey, listen, sorry, I don't have a lot of time. It's Bryan from This, That, and the Other. Look, okay, I want to tell you everything. I want to tell you the truth about wood. You want to know about the real stuff? You want to know why the earth is hollow and why we're being run by aliens? You want to know about the stuff they're putting in your Gatorade and why you should be eating your dogs and why renewable resources are a lie and we're living inside of a hologram. And I'll tell you all this, but you have to listen to This, That, and the Other. You have to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. Don't tell Sam, though. Don't tell him.
What are you doing? Are you making an ad without me?
No, listen, I gotta go. Subscribe to This, That, and the Other.
You bastard.
9/11 was a lie. What happened to buildings?
Yo, what's up, dudes? It's your boy Bryan, and welcome to another episode of What's Hood. I am filling in for FC today, who wishes everybody the best, and he hopes you guys are still out there smoking, joking, and choking on the truth, homie. As always, want to give a shout out to Binge on This, the network with the most, the one with the host, and all the shows out there that we got. Roll 420s. Our brand new D&D high fantasy podcast, role-playing podcast, tabletop game podcast. We also have Happy News with Perry Kurtz, This, That, and the Other with Bryan and Sam. That's me. Reading Ronin. Sam of All Trades, coming back, brand new revamped feel. And, Olden Times TV, so much more, so much content. Available for you guys either on YouTube or on iTunes under Binge on This. So I was trying to figure out something cool to talk about today, and I decided to land on alcohol, la cerveza, tequila, everything. Not everything, obviously, but I wanted to take a quick second and just kind of talk about some major staples in alcohol. Now, we know alcohol has been around since forevers. It's something that has been found time and time again, despite many civilizations attempting not to and knowing the dangers of alcohol. But it always seems to surface back up. It's almost like the myth of Prometheus is not that he brought flames down, but that he fought, fireball down. So at this point, I said to myself, what drink specifically do I want to focus on? Because again, there's so many drinks, and when it comes down to it, the process of alcohol is similar all across the board. It's fermentation. You need yeast. There's a lot of chemical reactions, mainly with sugar, that create the alcohol that we know and love. So I said to myself, well, why not focus on beer? Let's take a quick second and focus on the history of beer in Mesoamerica. And again, ancient cultures have been creating fermented corn drinks. Specifically, the Mayans had their own version of it. Well before the Spanish even showed up. And we know that European-style beer is generally brewed with barley. So when the two mixed, thanks to Cortez, and they brought those fermented alcohol beverages together, and created something new, essentially the type of beer that we know and love coming out of Mexico. Now, what happens at this point is the industry starts to develop a little bit more after the Mexican War of Independence, which we went over a few episodes back. And there was another thing that contributed specifically to beer in Mexico, and that was the arrival of German immigrants. So this is where I was like, what? German immigrants? So I was like, oh shit, bro. Like, I didn't know, so I look into it, right? And what happens is you fall onto this fella called Austrian Maximilian I, otherwise known as the monarch of the Second Mexican Empire. He was the younger brother of the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I. He was just this dude, He had a great Navy career. He was pretty fly and shit. And over a long period of time, he ends up being made the Emperor of Mexico for a short period. This has to do with the Mexican War of Independence. It has to do with the money that was owed. And like I said, you can go back and listen to Cinco de Mayo episode, and I go over it and explain exactly what happened for that to happen. And so at that point, Maximilian shows up in the 19th century. A bunch of German immigrants come with him. They open a whole bunch of breweries, bringing the knowledge together, making a mix. And they essentially end up by 1918 with 36 brewing companies. But as they get a little further into the 20th and 21st century, there ends up only being two major corporations in Mexico that control the beer. Grupo Modelo, which is now owned by AB and Bev, and FEMSA, which is owned by Heineken. And they control 90% of the Mexican beer market, which is amazing. That's crazy. 90% of the Mexican beer market. I don't know if you can say the same thing about America as far as their beer is concerned. I didn't look into it, but that is astounding. I can guarantee you that that's probably the same case here. But again, crazy. Even though the Chinese technically own Anheuser. Obviously it's, one of the biggest and strongest major exports out of the country. Right next to piñatas, which again I covered in a few episodes back. Now, let's talk a little bit exactly about how the beer essentially was made and how it was known back in the day. Now, prior to the Spanish conquest, they used a lot of agave plants, which is the major component of tequila, which I'm going to touch on after this beer portion of it. But they used that, and they used another plant called maguey, agave americana. So again, it's agave plants, special type of flowering plant that's native to Mexico. If you had to look at it or think of it in any way, it's kind of like little green swords, like thick green swords. They look like aloe, like those long things of aloe, but they're super pointy at the end. They look like Bart Simpson if he had green hair. They look like Goku if Goku had green hair. There we go. That's the best way to do it. So there are obviously a lot of different drinks that were made back then. You have drinks made from fermented juices. You have a honey wine that was brewed by the Mayas. Honey wine, imagine that. That sounds delicious. It was like the bark of a tree fermented in water with honey. I'd throw a couple of those back with the homies. There was chicha. Chicha is a common Spanish word for a whole bunch of traditional fermented beverages in the Andes region. It's kind of like aguardiente. Aguardiente is essentially like a blanket term. It's like spirits is essentially what the term of aguardiente is. It can be made of all different types of stuff, but essentially covers the term spirit. But chicha is another Spanish word for that as well. It turns out that during the Inca Empire, which we know was one of the major four Mesoamerican tribes, ancient cities, women were taught the technique of brewing chicha in feminine schools. Back then when there was a feminine school to teach women things, and the brewing of chicha was included in that, which I thought was actually very cool. Because they were like, hey, bro, you gotta keep him drunk, Sometimes in some smaller towns, the chicha is actually chewed and moistened in the mouth of the chicha maker. And what happens is a naturally occurring diastase enzyme, or diastate, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, and the saliva of the chewer catalyzes the breakdown of the starch in the maize into maltose. And maltose is another one of the components in the chicha. It's essentially what gets you fucked up. So I was like, damn, motherfuckers are just like chewing shit, and it's kind of weird. But still, essentially very cool. At that point, beer brewed with grains such as barley was produced in small quantities by Cortez, which essentially limited the supplies. So what happens at that point is, long story short, they combined the methods because they were competing with the native beverages. And so the breweries that were established at that time took those recipes, combining their own recipes. And, in years just before the independence, Mexico beer consumption was essentially established, which led to all types of rights over who can produce it, who's in charge of it. There's all types of shenanigans. You know how it is when when people get drunk on the liquor, everything gets loose. Their inhibitions, everything. It's a good time, though. It's a good time. So, we move a little bit forward into the future. Prohibition happens in the United States during the 1920s, which makes the Mexican beer industry skyrocket. Americans go over the border to drink. They essentially go there and run fucking drinks over the border, which is amazing. I would love to see a movie about that. But eventually you get to the point, in the 21st century where all of those smaller breweries, 36 beer producers at the time, end up getting consolidated, bought up. Heineken shows up, ganks them. And we end up kind of in the situation we are today where there's just two major hitters. Obviously, beer and specifically Bohemia is the oldest traditional Pilsner in Mexico. It's considered one of the finest beers in the world. I haven't had a chance to try it myself. It looks good. I mean, I can't knock it for trying it, but it is one of the longest aged products that's made in the cerveceria. And it is the only one that uses Lepa Styron hops, whatever the fuck that means. Again, a lot of my information comes from the internet, and I'm just trying to quote it to sound super smart. Looks great. It looks delicious. I would give it a shot if possible, if it was available. Again, you have your Tecate, your Sol, your Dos Equis. Most of those ones you can try at your local bar. Negro Modelo, which goes all the way back to 1926. Sold as a draft back in 1926. Pacifico, Estrella, Superior. Now, a lot of these you can get these easy out here in California without any trouble. One of the things I thought was very interesting was microbreweries. Microbreweries are new. It's not something big in Mexico. I think that probably has a lot to do with all the breweries being owned by two people, and most likely those two people being the mob or the cartels and stuff. But they do exist. They're out there. And you can look around for it and find probably hipster Mexicans who are wearing upside down. No, that'd be Australian hipsters. You could probably find them out there. They probably got better mustache than any hipster you'd ever find here. What was also very cool is the beer. Well, not cool, but the beer drinking and habits in Mexico are interesting for the most part. What I mean by that is a lot of the beer is not sold on tap. It's all cans and bottles. They don't like to do tapped over there. It's very interesting, and as for like Corona and like all that other stuff, and I say Corona the beer, not the virus, it's typically drank with lime juice. Well, they drink lime juice with almost every beer over there. Which brings us to the michelada, bro. So, the michelada is this drink cocktail. It's a very famous cocktail. It's generally just light beer, lime juice, salt, sometimes chile powder, sometimes Worcester sauce, soy sauce, tomato juice. Kind of depends on how you get it, but for the most part, juice, salt, light beer. That chile powder, it's all about that. You know what I mean? The salt is obviously put on the rim. You guys know what a fucking michelada is, but in case you don't, there's a less common version of it that's drank with clamato, which is that tomato juice, which I'm just not about. Clam, tomato juice, I'm not about that life. That shit is whack, bro. I'm not. You can keep clamato, bro. I'm not about that life. But micheladas are fucking fire, dog. Obviously, Americans, have really loved it. They take it, to the extreme, almost like a Bloody Mary. But it is one of those things that I thought was very interesting and very funny to read about, because it is something that nobody really knows the origin of. I mean, you could just sit back and just be like, oh, well, these motherfuckers just made it. Like, they made it and they were like you drink enough beer and you'll make anything, and, you know, 1 out of a million chances you'll actually hit a good combination. In this particular case, there is the michelada, and there are 2 reasons, supposedly, popular versions of the origin and the etymology of the michelada. So one of them has to do with this dude named Michel Esper. All right. So in 1960, Esper begins asking for his beer with a lime, salt, ice, and a straw, in a special cup he called Chabela, as if for like a beer lemonade, is what he essentially wanted. And so the members of the club started asking for beers done that way. They were like, can I get a Michel's lemonade? Can I get a Michel lemonade? Oye, can I get one of those Michel lemonades? With the name shortening over time to Michelada. So as time went on, they started throwing sauces on there, making their own recipes. All the same recipe. Most of the recipes have the same thing: ice and chili powder in it, with lime and salt. That's the same across the board. It's usually made with a dark beer instead of a light beer. But, you know, again, in America, it kind of changed. They like to do their shit with, you know Anheuser, but the Budweiser Chelada, Bud Light Chelada, fucking weirdos. Another etymology states that Michelada is a portmanteau of michelada. A portmanteau, just to break that down, is a linguistic blend of words in which parts of multiple words or their phonemes are combined into a new word, such as smog, coined by blending smoke and fog, or motel, from motor and hotel. Oh, there you go, a little bit of knowledge. The word chela is a popular term for a beer in Mexico. When you ask for a chela, you're asking for a cold beer. Oye, échamela, chela. Oye, deme una chela. You're asking for a cold beer. Therefore, the phrase michelada means my ice cold beer. Interesting stuff. Now let's move on to the harder hitting stuff in Mexico. One of the major, most recognizable liquors in Mexico is tequila. Now, tequila is distilled from the blue agave plant, which is primarily in the area surrounding the city of Tequila in Guadalajara, out in Mexico, the central western Mexico state of Jalisco. Apparently, the red volcanic soil in the region of Tequila are well suited to growing the blue agave. That's why over 300 million of the plants are harvested there each year. And that's why they kind of had to name the city after it, you know. If they had grown palm trees, they would have called it palms, you know, like we do out here in California. So, Mexican law states that tequila can only be produced in the state of Jalisco. Look at me butchering the fucking language. Tequila is recognized as a Mexican designation of origin product in more than 40 countries. Damn, so tequila can only be made in Mexico? That's crazy. It is protected through NAFTA and Canada and the United States through bilateral agreements with the individual countries such as Japan and Israel. Wow. That's crazy. Wow, that's cool, lad. Look at that. We're all learning something. That's pretty fucking baller. So, tequila was first produced in the 16th century, like I said, near Tequila. It was this fermented beverage which they had created from the agave plant, also known as pulque, which was consumed in pre-Columbian central Mexico before European contact. So when the Spanish conquistadores ran out of their own brandy, they began to distill the agave to produce one of North America's first indigenous distilled spirits. Around 1600, Don Pedro Sanchez de Tagle, the Marquis of Altamira, began mass-producing tequila at the first factory in the territory of modern-day Jalisco. It starts getting bigger, starts getting better. In a move to take ownership of the term tequila, the Mexican government declared the term as its intellectual property in 1974. opening a new door of business opportunity and international gain for the country of Mexico as a whole. That's absolutely baller. I, again, did not know about that. Although some tequilas have remained as family-owned brands, most well-known tequila brands are owned by large multinational corporations. As opposed to beer, over 100 distilleries make over 900 brands of tequila in Mexico, and over 200 brand names have been registered. Due to this, each bottle of tequila contains a serial number depicting which distillery the tequila was produced. Because only so many distilleries are used, multiple brands of tequila come from the same location. That's such a gangster move. Like, if rednecks could do that with moonshine, I bet your ass they would. But that's so smart for them to have done that ahead of time. That's the George Lucas move of liquor. They were like, you know what? We're just going to make sure we own everything. And everybody was like, what do you mean everything? They were like, everything! A 1 liter bottle of limited edition premium tequila was sold for $225,000 in July 2006 in Tequila, Jalisco. God damn it! In Tequila, Jalisco by the company Tequila Ley 925. It was a 2-kilo display of platinum and gold tequila. The manufacturer received a certificate from the Guinness World Book of Records for the most expensive bottle of tequila spirits ever sold. Now, I don't know about you guys. I'm not about tequila. I don't like it. I find that it's a little too strong. It kind of leads to trouble. I'm a big fan of drinking, but I'm just not that good at it. So, anytime anybody says, let's get tequila shots going on, let's start doing that, I'm automatically like, nah, I'm not about this life. Because after reading a little bit more about this, I can confirm that if the conquistadores were like, yo, we're out of brandy, let's get some of this tequila shit going on, they got that shit into their system, and then they started running around and fucking shit up. That should be the perfect example and warning as to why you shouldn't do this. In June 2013, the ban on importation of premium 100% blue agave tequila into China was lifted following a state visit to Mexico by President of China. It's pretty cool. He came to China. They got him fucked up. And then they started sending that shit to Chinese markets, homie. On August 30th, 2013, the first 70,380 bottles of premium tequila from 10 brands arrived in Shanghai. The arrival happened during an event held at the House of Roosevelt, a well-known club located on the Bund, an area with a long tradition of importing alcoholic beverages into China. Very, very cool. In 2018, the Mexican government approved a proposal to celebrate the third Saturday of March as National Tequila Day. So there you go. There you have it. A little bit of information on tequila and its effects and its overall creation in Mexico. And not just tequila. And if hold on real quick, what I do want to touch on before I end the episode, the difference between silver or white tequila. So if silver or white tequila is the desired final product, it's all about the distillation in the final process. Rested, or reposado, or aged añejo tequila must be matured in a 200-liter white oak barrel for at least 2 months for the former and 12 months for the latter. There are, however, more than 50 different companies producing tequila in Mexican province of Jalisco with different maturation times according to the variety of tequila and desired quality of the final product. All companies producing tequila have their aging process regulated and fiscalized by the Mexican government. Wild. And there you go, homie. The tequila worm misconception, it isn't really weird. There are only certain places or certain mezclas, which are essentially, the other terms for other alcohols, are ever sold with gusanos in them, which are worms. That's just so you can get the fucking tourists. It's not traditionally done in there. If you did find a worm, a larva in the agave plant while you were making tequila, it probably means that the plant itself has an infestation. It's a lower product. But unfortunately, everybody still thinks, oh, you found a tequila, a worm in the tequila. That's what's supposed to happen. It just means it's extra better, which is not the case. So, you do a little salt, a little lime here in America. They usually drink it straight over there in Mexico because they're bad motherfuckers. It doesn't state on the label that it's manufactured 100% from blue agave. Or if it doesn't say on the label that it is manufactured from 100% blue agave, which means no sugar added, then by default that tequila is a mixto. Manufactured from at least 51% blue agave. So you always look out for that. You want 100% blue agave tequila. It's the only thing that you really, really want to deal with. Yeah, and that's about it. Once again, Mexico owns all of the essential rights to tequila. Once it's imported to Canada for sale, though, it is legal for tequila to be diluted with bottled or purified water to adjust it to the desired strength and then resold. Because I guess the Canadians, they're not down for that shit. Similar to Canada, the U.S. law says that tequila must be manufactured in Mexico in compliance with the laws of Mexico regulating the manufacturing of tequila. However, tequila cannot be sold in the U.S. at under 40% of alcohol concentrate. So they need that strong, strong shit. And, well, shit, you got to give them to her for that. And that's it. That is, hold on real quick. One of the other things that I'm looking through my notes just to see if there was any other cool things. I mean, there's a little bit, Kahlua I found out is a Mexican drink. It is essentially what Kahlua means is the house of the Alcua people in the Veracruz Nahuatl language, spoken before the Spanish conquest. I don't know anything about that, but I saw that in Wikipedia. It was essentially created around 1936. Has been made since then. It is, just a coffee flavored liqueur. It's like rum and sugar and coffee. It's all right, but it's really not that. That's like high school chick drinks. But so there you go, guys. Just a little bit of knowledge and information on beer and tequila as it pertains in Mexico. There's a lot of other drinks in Mesoamerica that a lot of our ancestors drank, made pretty much from the same thing into different methods. In Colombia, aguardiente is essentially what a lot of Colombians drink, and like I said, that's made from all types of shit, all types of fruit and all types of sugar cane, primarily sugar because they need it for the fermentation process. I don't brew beer. I don't understand how that works. Maybe we'll go over another episode on the actual process of beer, but it is very interesting to see, one, that beer is pretty much the main staple out there in Mexico, and our version of beer came from, Cortez and the introduction of the Spanish, unwillingly, and that beer is owned by pretty much two companies. That's it, baby. They got the monopoly on that beer out there. It's like the cartels, and it's interesting to find out that all tequila has to be produced in Mexico. That's not something that I wanted to assume, but it is something very interesting for me to learn. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick little episode of What's Hood. I hope you guys are doing okay during the quarantine. We are doing okay on our side. We'd like for you guys to take a second and follow us on YouTube at Binge on This. You'll see Bryan, me, myself, and Sam. Our faces right there at the very front along with our logo. If you want to catch up on any of our episodes, any clips, any of the other shows available on YouTube, your best bet is to subscribe and just take a quick Zoom look through those. Not through Zoom, but take a quick look through those. There's plenty of content over there, especially during the quarantine, for you to, kind of fill your time. Even though, during quarantine, it's been, I haven't really been listening to any podcasts. I haven't been doing any of my normal stuff just because we've been so out of whack. So it's understandable if you haven't really been on your podcast game as much as you have been beforehand. But if you love me and you love the show and you like the content that's coming out of it, you're only going to help us more by subscribing to the YouTube. And make sure that you guys follow the rest of the great shows that we have available on the network. That is the Binge on This channel. That is Binge on This channel on Instagram. It's Binge on This on YouTube. Make sure to follow this, that, and the other. What's Hood, Happiness with Harry Kurtz, Reading Ronin, Same of All Trades, our brand new Dungeons & Dragons show, Roll 420s, high fantasy, role-playing, tabletop game, not made for your mama. And finally, Olden Times TV, available on YouTube. And that is all from me to you guys. I send all of my love, and we will see you at the next light.